Hello and welcome everybody. We are going to do something different for this upcoming season, the 2025-26 NBA season, which is just fucking crazy. But usually before every season, I do two videos where I tier both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, which is sort of like a rankings, but I also, within those rankings, put teams in certain tiers. But this time I'm going to do something different. We are going to power rank all 30 NBA teams, just straight 1 through 30. Obviously, conferences and all that will be taken into consideration, or have been. I have done like 4 drafts on these. I have rearranged some teams, put teams in original positions, then moved them out, etc. But I have finally come down to a final draft, and this is why I'm starting this video. Now, it's going to be different. Now, to start off, I'm going to be doing teams 30 through 25 in one video, 24 through 20 in another video, 19 through 15 in another video. And then as we get closer and closer to the top team, and as you notice, I am starting backwards, not going forwards, we're going to make you guys wait to see who the top team is. But as we get closer, there's going to be videos on the individual teams as we get higher up in the rankings, maybe a video of 2 teams in the next ranking, or one of the top teams in the top 10 might get its own video. But for today's video, we are doing 30 through 26, then 25 through 21 in the next video, etc. With that said, let's start with number 30, the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz look like they are going to be full-on tanking this year. They gave Will Hardy a nice contract extension for his troubles so far in Utah. The first 2 years under Will Hardy, it looked like, well, definitely the first year and a little bit the second year, but they did the thing where they tried to compete for a play-in and then realized that it wasn't going to happen and shut it down maybe a little bit too late to get into the lottery sweepstakes, and they ended up picking 9th and 10th, if I remember correctly, in those first 2 years under Will Hardy. But last year, it was an injury / kind of tank job. They won 17 games. The veterans like Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson didn't even reach 50 games. A lot of their young guys got the majority of the playing time. Young players like Walker Kessler had a bounce-back year after an injury-riddled second year. I still like Walker Kessler a lot, just as a defensive presence, a rebounding force, and somebody who moves around a bit better than he gets credit for as a 7-footer. I like that front court with him and Markkanen. Even though I feel like Markkanen's stock has gone down a little bit, I still think he's a really good player, and I just think this situation in Utah, I don't know what's going to happen with Markkanen because there's all that drama, going back to last summer, about whether he would take the extension or not, whether they would trade him or not. Then when he signed the extension, he became non-trade eligible, and it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. I imagine the Jazz are going to keep him, but this is going to be full-on just another year where they're going to be bad. They're going to try to get back into the loaded 2026 draft while they develop Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr., try to see what you can get out of Cody Williams, Taylor Hendricks. As far as Ace Bailey's concerned, I really like this spot for Ace Bailey. Maybe Ace Bailey never wanted to be in Utah originally, but he's there now. That's the reality. But I actually think for him and what he wants, or what he appears to want, which is to see how good he is, which is understandable for a talented 18-year-old. This was probably a good spot for him to test that. I think if he went on a contending team or, in the unique situation, say he went to the Sixers or whatever, I think he would have had a good foundation to build his game too, because he would have been in a condensed role and you can build off of that foundation. But being in Utah where he could get all the reps he needs to work out all the kinks, etc., I actually like that for Ace Bailey. Love the Walter Clayton Jr. pick. And they just have a whole mismatch of interesting guards that, we finally get to see who's going to shake out of it between Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Keontae George, see what you could get out of a second year of Kyle Filipowski. the veterans that are there or that signed with Utah or got traded there, I don't think they should be getting that much playing time. I mean, these are like veterans that you play when you know you're going to tank, like getting Jusuf Nurkic. That's just Jusuf Nurkic starting at center would be malpractice. But Kyle Anderson, George Niang, Kenyon Martin Jr., who is sort of a vet now. He's 26. But I don't think any of those guys should be getting in the way of the development of this team, which should be the goal. But I think with all this young talent, Utah is still slated here at 30. Then slotted in at number 29, we have the young talent of the Washington Wizards. I actually love what the Wizards have been doing the last few years, just stockpiling players, stockpiling assets, and quietly they have set themselves up to have cap space in the 2027 free agency class, which is not too dissimilar to what the Houston Rockets did a few years ago when, you know, they had Steven Silas and they were stacking all these young players. You had Eason, Amin Thompson, Alperen Şengün, etc. Then the Rockets decide to go in a little bit for one summer, signing Fred VanVleet, bringing in Dillon Brooks. You bring in Ime Udoka to instill this tough-minded culture. You have an incredible year where you finish at 500 or whatever it was, and then the next year you take a massive leap, which was, you know, this past season last year, where you win 52 games, and then you set yourself up to be an attractive place to want to then you set yourself up to be an attractive place where a superstar wants to say, hey, you're on my short list of teams I want to get traded to, and they did that with Kevin Durant. I see the Wizards going on a similar path here. They have stockpiled some young players, and speaking of the Rockets, they did end up getting Cam Whitmore, which is a buy low, high reward type of move that I like. You still have Corey Kispert, who is a really good player and a sneaky trade candidate for this upcoming season just because of his contract and his shooting. But I'm a fan of Alex Sarr, even though I don't know necessarily if he's going to be a 5 or a 4 long-term ultimately. I love Trey Johnson coming out of the draft. I wouldn't mind if the Sixers had taken him. 3 might have been a little too high to take Trey Johnson, but I love his shooting. Bilal Coulibaly, who is apparently Andrew Tate's #1 fan, which is weird, but whatever. As a player, I like Coulibaly just for his defense. And then Keyshawn George, another solid pickup. Bub Carrington, another solid player. There's just a lot of really good young players on this team that I like. I don't know how it's all going to mesh, but they also have some veterans that could make some of these games competitive, at least with the other teams that are in this tier. You know, I like Chris Middleton. I like CJ McCollum. Honestly, I had the Wizards a little bit higher, but there are some teams ahead of them just in terms of volatility where they could either be very last or they could be, you know, way up in this video. But for here I have the Wizards. But for here I have the Wizards. There's just so much youth on this team, like literally under 24 years old. And I just see them going through some more growing pains this year. But they have set themselves up for now and in the future. And I have a hot take. In about 3 years, this Wizards team, I could see them, if their young guys develop their big 3 of Coulibaly, Sarr, you know, Keyshawn George, Trey Johnson turns into something really good defensively on that end as well, maybe outperforms expectations. With all this length and size the Wizards have with their youth, in 3 years, they could definitely be a surprisingly good defense. Then at number 28, probably the most volatile team in the NBA, outside of the Philadelphia 76ers and a few other teams probably, a team that I had in the 29th spot originally in my first draft of these power rankings, the New Orleans Pelicans, who just have a roster now full of interesting vets, a mismatch of young players, draft picks, and a star player who plays like a star when he's on the court. And that part, the on-the-court part, that's sort of the big problem. They also did one of the 3 dumbest trades of the 2020 decade, and we're about 5 years into the 2020 decade. But that's what happens when you fill out your front office with Troy Weaver and Joe Dumars. You're just going to get some dumb shit that happens. That Derek Queen trade on draft night, haven't really talked about it much on this channel. Just one of the dumbest trades, man. Like, you can't even get that pick top 10 protected. You think you're really going to be good this year in the Western Conference? Because that's one of the only reasons I can think you make this trade. And even then, that's still a dumb reason. This trade is just stupid, value-wise. The only way this will work is if Derek Queen becomes a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer. Because you are giving up an unprotected first-round pick in a draft class that a lot of people are once again raving about. This is the class with Cam Boozer and a few others in there. And the Pelicans are going to be terrible again next year. And on top of that, Derek Queen suffered a knee injury, and who knows when he's going to be back. I would slow play it if I were the Pelicans, but a knee surgery that has a 8 to 12 week reevaluation, which I imagine is coming up very soon, not great. They have players that I like. I could see Willie Green putting together some lineups that could work. Hell, I even thought about putting the Pelicans higher in the 20s, but because of Zion Williamson's recent injury history, that makes it hard to bet on. Given the injury history, given how some of the players like Jordan Poole, for example, and a few others sort of interfere with what I would want if I was a Pelicans fan, which is the development of Jeremiah Fears, the development of Jordan Hawkins, etc. I just don't know how good this Pelicans team is going to be. I don't even know if they're going to be better than what their expectation is this year, which is probably one of the 3 worst teams in the league. They are also in the West, which doesn't bode well, but I like Yves Missi. I like Herb Jones. Love Trey Murphy III. Probably their most valuable trade asset if, they can't figure out how to get this thing going with Zion within the next 1 to 2 seasons. But I love Trey Murphy III. Jordan Poole could be somebody that I could see fitting well. He had a good year in Washington last year. Now that's relative, but it wasn't the carnival clown show that it was when he first got to Washington 2 seasons ago. He was actually back to 2021-22 Golden State level efficiency Jordan Poole, right? And that's a solid player, a solid scoring, creative player that can get a few passes here and there. But some of the other free agent signings like Kevon Looney, when you were probably going to be playing Queen and Missi, just some of the moves really confused me, especially the trade. But they have young talent on this team that I do like. How it fits together, I'm not sure. Willie Green is a good coach, I do believe that. But it's the Zion question, it's the weird roster fit question, and the fact that they are in the Western Conference that I just can't put them any higher than 28. Then at number 27, and they easily could have been 28, 29, or 30. I feel like you could say that about all the teams I'm mentioning in this video. The Brooklyn Nets. And if there is one thing I can say about the Brooklyn Nets, is that they will play hard for Jordi Fernandez, who is a good coach. He was here in Sacramento for a while. A lot of people think of the world of him. And he had them boys playing hard last year. And as somebody who was watching a lot more of the tanking teams towards the end of the season, more than usual, I usually do watch them, but when the Sixers were trying to keep their pick, you definitely tune in to the tanking wars and try to see who's going to win and who's going to, pull the thing where they pull their starters while the team's winning, so you could try to piss away the game and make it look nice. And the Nets still played hard, even with D'Angelo Russell, even with Cam Thomas, even with, Cam Johnson still, there. They still played hard. Now, they are going to be led by Michael Porter Jr., who, I don't know why he's been going on this podcast tour, but if there is one thing I can say other than the fact that what he has said has not been surprising, if you really pay attention to what Michael Porter Jr. says and how he, what he says on, some of his personal podcast episodes and stuff. One, shout out to Jokic in Denver for keeping that shit under wraps. Two, I don't know if I want someone who makes those type of decisions or says the type of things he is saying, leading a team where I just used all 5 of my first round draft picks and want to see how these guys develop. Don't know if I want Michael Porter Jr. leading them as an example. Just throwing that out there. And yes, that is a connection I am making. But Michael Porter Jr. is a good basketball player if you condense him to the role that he was on Denver and playing off of, one of the best players in the world, or one of the best players of all time, I should say. But yeah, don't really see the Nets being higher than 27th. Really wanted to drop them to 30 just because I just don't like the mix of veterans, or in particular, I don't like the idea of Michael Porter Jr. being the best player on a team. But they do have some vets that will make these games close, competitive. They will probably sneak some games, but if I were the Nets, I would just be trying, like all these teams in this video, I'd just be trying to get into the 2026 draft lottery sweepstakes. But as far as players go, you still have Nick Claxton there. Terrence Mann's still pretty solid. I love Hayward Highsmith. Michael Porter Jr., if you could just not get him to try to create off the dribble, will be an effective player. But, you just got to see how all the young guys they drafted shake. I mean, you used 5 first-round draft picks. Did anybody expect the Nets to use all 5 of their draft picks on draft night? I didn't, but they did. They're all going to have to develop somehow. And I think with Jordy Fernandez leading the helm, this team is just going to be playing their ass off. And even though Michael Porter Jr. has definitely been on a stupid podcast media tour run, I do think that he is a good enough player to where the Nets are probably just a little bit better and a little bit more cohesive than, say, the Pelicans, a little bit more experienced than, say, the Wizards. And maybe they're not in and out. They are tanking, or it is in their best interest to tank, but it's not as bad as the Utah Jazz. Then you have some of the guys that took advantage of the playing time because they were playing hard, like Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson, like Noah Clowney's game. Interesting mismatch of vets and young talent. Then, at number 26, a team where I just can't stay off the narcotic. The Charlotte Hornets. Now, I know the last 3 seasons, the Charlotte Hornets haven't warranted still the excitement that I share in this roster. There's definitely been some injuries. Definitely been some coaching changes. LaMelo Ball has had 3 coaches so far in the LaMelo Ball era. They've only finished above 500 once, and that was in the play-in back in the 2021-22 season. But I just cannot quit the Charlotte Hornets young core. Still a big believer in LaMelo Ball. I know that last year, really the last 2 seasons, even in the injury-riddled season he had where he only played 22 games, I believe, he was expanding his shot chart a little bit and was taking some ridiculous shots. But LaMelo still, at the end of the day, he averaged, 25, 7.5 assists a game, took 11 threes, shot 33%. And like I said, there were some tough shots. But it's really just his injuries that are the biggest concern. He's only played 105 games in the last 3 seasons. 105 games is a full NBA season and a quarter of a new NBA season. That's how many games he has played in the last 3 years. He gets injured frequently. The defense is still not good, but I just believe in the offensive talent. You don't have the passing gene that he has without having a high basketball IQ. And Zach Lowe said something on his recent podcast. What was it? I think it was a month ago. He was talking about the Charlotte Hornets, and he brought up a good point, and it's a point that I thought about a lot. And that's why going into last season, I like the Charlotte Hornets a lot. I just love Brandon Miller. And I think this thing advances as Brandon Miller gets better and he establishes himself as the nominal 2 guard next to LaMelo Ball. And I also like Con Knipple, who is somebody I would not have minded if the Sixers had taken in the draft. A 6'7", really tough, burly driver, but can also shoot. Really haven't seen a shooter with his body type. He looks more like a defensive end, like width-wise, compared to your usual shooter. But I like Con Knipple. You still have Redacted on the team, unfortunately. You get rid of Yusuf Nurkic. You bring in Colin Sexton, who would be a good bench piece as a guard coming off the bench. You have Josh Green, Grant Williams. They have players that I like, but they're all players that are 6'5" and above. So they have an outline of a team that you could say has a little lineup versatility. And I like that personally. They don't have really any centers on this roster. They drafted Ryan Kalkbrenner in the 2nd round. Mason Plumlee is back in Charlotte. Moussa Diabate might be their starting center. And so the center position really doesn't leave me in a great place with this Hornets team. But if you're talking about fit, talent, and everything else, I just like this young core a lot more compared to, the Pelicans, Wizards, Nets, and the Jazz. It's about time for the Charlotte Hornets to put it together and put up or shut up, because I should have them ahead of the Kings. I should have them ahead of the Raptors. I should have them ahead of the Bulls, even the 76ers, even the Celtics, who are low-key. I am not high on the Celtics this year, but I just have to see it first at this point. But this is also a spot at 26 where I'm also like, hey, still on that Hornets narcotic, baby. Not going to stop. So that's 30 through 26. Stay tuned for 25 through 21. And we will see you soon.